A Scottish drag queen who co-authored a guide for trans youth for a major charity called LGBT Youth Scotland has been convicted of distributing child pornography. 39-year-old Andrew Easton wrote a coming out guide given to school kids as young as 13. He was convicted of grooming a 13-year-old boy for indecent images. Here is Andrew Easton, purple hair, earring, fat, unshaven. Man, did they even need a trial? This is the face of every single person who tries to get my comedy nights cancelled. The Venn diagram of people who nonce and people who get offended by comedy is just a single circle. Even more incredibly, Andrew Easton isn't the first paedophile to be linked to this charity. The former chief executive of LGBT Youth Scotland, James Rennie, was found guilty in 2009 of possessing child pornography and running Scotland's largest paedophile network using company resources. To paraphrase Oscar Wilde, to have one person convicted of paedophilia may be regarded as a misfortune, but to have two looks like carelessness. Although at least Rennie was given a life sentence, this was back in the days when paedophiles went to jail. These days they get a slap on the wrist, which they probably enjoy. Andrew Easton received no jail time, despite Easton distributing sexual images of the highest category featuring very young children. Sheriff Morag McLaughlin let him walk free. Instead, he was ordered to carry out 200 hours of unpaid work and will remain on the sex offenders register for just 3 years. For a guy like that, the sex offenders register isn't a punishment, it's a networking opportunity. The charity, LGBT Youth Scotland, boasts that they have trained thousands of teachers over LGBT inclusivity. This coming out guide that this they-them co-authored was made available to young people through schools, local authorities, the Care Inspectorate and government-run health and social care authorities. Pretty much every branch of the government that you should be able to trust was pushing propaganda written by a paedophile into the hands of children. This guide is aimed at youths who are trans, non-binary, or are questioning their gender identity. The guide advises them to spend less time with certain people and more with others. This is a classic tactic of paedophiles: drive a wedge between the victim and their friends and family. Say to victims being groomed, "Don't speak to your parents, they don't understand you, speak to me instead." It's incredible that this paedophile managed to get his grooming technique written into a government-funded document placed directly into the hands of children by their school teachers, doctors and care workers. But it's not that surprising. The Scottish Nationalist Party, who run Scotland, plan to criminalise parents who question their child's gender transition. If parents refuse to go along with the transition, perhaps because they agree with the Cass review and think that drugging, sterilising and surgically maiming young people might have some unforeseen negative consequences, or possibly they think that state-sponsored paedophiles such as Andrew Easton might not have completely noble intentions for their children, well, if a parent stands in the way of their child being transitioned by these activists, they're facing up to 7 years in jail. This should have alarm bells ringing. You've got dodgy activists convincing vulnerable children that they need to transition, but instead of getting the police to look at these activists, the police are going to arrest the parents who try to protect their children. LGBT Youth Scotland attempted to distance themselves from Easton, who demanded to be called Daddy and used secure messaging to send messages to his schoolboy victim and photographs of his private parts. Dr. Mary Crawford, the chief executive of LGBT Youth Scotland, said, "We were deeply troubled to learn of Mr. Easton's criminal actions. We condemn anyone that exploits or harms young people." This is a genuine picture of she, her, they, them, by the way. These people are impossible to satirise. It's like purple hair as a warning, like the bright markings on a poisonous caterpillar. Why do sexualised materials need to be given to kids anyway? Kids shouldn't be sexualised, and frankly, any activist interested in distributing stuff about sex needs to have their hard drive checked, especially when it's funded by us. LGBT Youth Scotland received £700,000 in funding from the Scottish Government and other parts of the state in 2019. Scottish Conservative politician Megan Gallagher said, "This is a deeply disturbing situation. It's long overdue that we audit just how much public money this organisation receives and seek assurances over what safeguarding assessments are in place." Another Scottish politician, Ash Regan, said, "Serious questions must be asked about why Scottish children's educational guidance is being shaped by unqualified lobby groups that not only overreach their published remit, but operate without any apparent oversight." The Scottish Government tried to absolve themselves of any responsibility, saying education authorities bodies are responsible for ensuring visitors undergo disclosure checks, and LGBT Youth Scotland's safeguarding policy is an operational matter for that organisation. The Scottish Government went on to say, "The Coming Out Guide is not a Scottish Government publication. The Scottish Government cannot comment on individual criminal cases." I know it's easy to be generous when it's not your money, it's the taxpayers, but why is the Scottish Government funding dodgy organisations without performing any due diligence? This is part of a bigger problem. Governments fund charities, activists and NGOs who present themselves as experts but often have extreme views and harbour some dodgy people. These groups then lobby the government can then pretend that they're responding to public demand, when in fact they're just responding to radical communist paedophiles whose opinions are miles away from what the public actually think. And sometimes left-wing governments such as Scotland's, which is full of many of the same kind of radical communist nonces as these activist groups, well, these governments fund these groups specifically to be lobbied with their preferred opinions. They're just paying for the opinions they want to be chucked at them. It's anti-democratic and often brings down politicians. The SNP lost about 3/4 of their Westminster seats in the last election after implementing radical gender ideology that made them a laughingstock and put male rapists in female prisons. The amount spent on charities, activists and NGOs is insane. The Irish government, as one example, spends 8.1% of its budget, so that's €6.2 billion, on the non-profit sector. As the Scottish Government has done now, this allows the government to wash its hands of any negative consequences. But sadly, this creates an ecosystem of activists who receive lots of government cash and have lots of power, but have very little oversight. Just as the Catholic Church had power, resources, access to children, and a status that made it difficult for victims to criticise them or seek justice, so these modern organisations have access to children, enormous resources, and any criticism of them is dismissed as far-right bigotry. But as we can see with Andrew Easton and many other cases, it's just making them a magnet for paedophiles. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, and if you want to support me making these videos and get exclusive content and be part of a nice community of the only sane people left in the West, then sign up to my Patreon. There's a link below. And if you'd rather just buy me a pumpkin spice chai latte, then there's a link for that too. Oh, by the way, if you want to feel some proper Black Mirror style doom, apparently kids are saying like and subscribe now when they say goodbye to each other, because that's what people say at the end of YouTube videos. Okay, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Bye bye.